We are leg day, and this is now coming to the end of my current training cycle. So I'm slowly seeing my energy and kind of motivation coming down because fatigue's accumulating across the training week. So this will be my last day before the deload. So leg day. Going into this deload, probably just train 3 days across the 7 just to give myself the extra time off, and I can get caught up on work, but that's kind of my preference to deload. So I'm gonna walk you through the session. We're gonna explain why I have it laid out the way that I do and go through each exercise and give you some rationale behind it. But today's the last day before a deload, so smash it. That's what we'll do. So first exercise for the session, do a prime lying leg curl. So main thing for function of the hamstrings, I wanna train through a full range. So with the lying leg curl, you train in a hip extension point and knee flexion. So you're working the short end. I like doing this in the beginning of the session so it doesn't limit my output when I go into doing the seated leg curl later on. Also, this requires more hip demand to stabilize the pelvis. It's not letting your butt shoot up. So cueing on this is trying to drive the pelvis into the pad and then flex the abs at the same time. And that can prevent a lot of that lower back coming into it that some guys get. As far as like loading the prime, I'll do the majority of the load on the top peg, so it gets really hard right off the bottom. So we're loading about mid-range, lets off towards the top. So we'll just mainly train that short, mid-range to shortened portion of the hamstring here. Later in the session with more fatigue, then I can pull more out of just having the lengthen phase and training the stretch piece in the seated leg curl. Also, I feel I've been doing this for a long time with hamstrings first. Kind of feels like it warms up my knees before going into doing my squat pattern. So 3 sets here, then we'll go on to a squat. Right, so second exercise for the session, going to my squat pattern. So the order of this should really be dictated around what are your weak points to bring up, starting first. Then from there, what exercises have some of the greatest systemic demands. So like a big compound movement, being able to train that muscle through a full range. So one that fits into the criteria for moving into quads is a pendulum squat. So it'll be my more full range quad movement. Interesting how it works. Have a lot of load up top. As it swings down, you're getting a little bit of load let off. But what's unique about it too is that it kind of rotates around the knee joint, so you get a lot of tension for the quad. It's definitely a quad bias movement. It hits you pretty hard mid-range, so you'll feel some let off at the very bottom. And then as you come up right in the middle, that's when you hit a lot of tension, and then it kind of lets off again at the top. So good mid-range movement to start with. Starting with something that loads when you're completely lengthened out, it could be precarious, so that's why we have some other movements that we'll do. But pendulum squat will be a great choice to start with for more quad bias. So here in this one, this has been 3 working sets for me, staying in 8 to 12 rep range. I've been hitting a little high on that. I came up, I think it was 8 weeks ago, I had a quad injury, Smith squatting. So this has been my work back into the Smith squat. Smith squat loads really hard, fully lengthened. So this one with the let off on the bottom has been a nice transition back to doing the Smith squat. So this next meso cycle is when I'll put that one back in and rotate this one out, because I do want a little bit more glute focus. So this isn't the best exercise for what I need, but it was what I needed for around this injury that happened. But at the end of the session, we'll put a little bit more glute in, so take care of that. Come on. All right, so after the pendulum squat, I now go back to train hamstrings. So normally I could go do my leg press next, but I let some of the fatigue dissipate a little bit in the quads, and then rotate between the two so I can keep that stimulus really high. So we trained the hamstring shortened earlier. So now we're gonna go into something that's very brace stabilized, stabilizes the pelvis, and trains the hamstring in the lengthened position. So we haven't really hit that range, and also being a little bit more fatigued, we can still have a little bit that we can get out of it. So just key here, so I see a lot of people will still arch the back, and they use the pelvis to initiate some of the movement. So when you do lock down, normally when you rotate, the body wants to kick out of the machine. So grab the handles and push down and back, trying to crunch down on the abs, and that'll help keep the pelvis from wanting to anteriorly tilt. Because when you're contracting your abs, you're not gonna be able to contract your erectors at the same time. So that's the general position for it. Here, we'll do 3 sets, which will wrap off hamstrings. So it'll be 6 sets working just for hamstrings. And that will fully develop the full range for hamstrings. So you don't have to do an RDL to fully develop the hamstrings, because basically this movement, if you look at the positioning, if I had a bar in my hands, that's an RDL, right? It's training the hamstring in the fully lengthened position, exactly what a seated hamstring curl does. So it just depends which one you're picking based on what else you need. So if you need erectors and you need glutes and you need hamstrings, RDL is a great application for that. But if those aren't areas that you're going to focus on for the day, you could just do a seated hamstring curl. All right, so moving on from the seated leg curl, we'll move to a leg press. And why I picked this leg press is because what I was explaining earlier in my squat is that it's a very quad dominant squat. I do want more glute in the movement, but that's what I needed for my safety profile. So I have this leg press picked because it is an arch arc motion. So as you're pushing, your foot's actually moving down, which gives you some degree of hip extension. So for a leg press, it does get a lot of glute involved. I'll do it single leg as well, from the functional component to unilateral load. So just to challenge and make sure I do have the ability to stabilize each leg and have carryover to other movements I do that are bilateral. Make sure there's no discrepancies between legs. Also a nice one in this is that as you're pushing up, the pendulum increases the moment arm to where the load is heavier at the top. So now you're also getting some loading with the quad short. So it's a nice combo. It's going to get some glute involvement, get another range of the quad that I haven't trained. And on this one, I'll hit 2 sets in the 10 to 15 rep range. Right, so after the leg press, moving on to leg extension. So one thing in all the movements that we did, we were training quads in mid-range and then also pretty much fully lengthened. We got some shortening, however, not fully with that machine. So it gets kind of mechanically advantaged at the top. So one thing that we'll train is leg extension. For one, we'll get the quad fully in shortened position. And how this moves, the load doesn't necessarily change across. However, the quad gets to a position where it's hard to produce strength, so it's always harder at the top of this leg extension. Also, it's an opportunity to train the rectus femoris, which we haven't done in any of the other movements to a great extent. So it's why we can fully develop the quad in all the movements selected that we did. Now, one thing that we didn't do today is we did train the glute fully lengthened, but we didn't do it close to hip extension. I programmed that on my back day. So I do a 45-degree glute raise on that back day to train that function of the glute. So that's why you don't see it included today. But I do these single leg because when I get in the machine, you'll see my legs would externally rotate otherwise. And when we line up on this machine, we want that knee directly putting up to the sky and the pad right in the front. So positioning yourself single leg, you can accomplish that. For if you have like bigger quads, sometimes you just want to like kick out and extend. So you can get some loading on the medial portion of the knee doing that. So rationale of the setup here. That wrapped up my leg session. Fully toasted. We'll be on to deload week after this. Any questions on this leg day? Leave them comments below. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.